different Swedish ambassadors around the region, wasn't it? I really learned a lot from the different parts of ASEAN they represent. So thank you for that. And thank you all for your patience, because we have the stage set with the fantastic IKEA furniture once again. And I would like to introduce you to our next moderator, Ms. Karin Nilsdotter, who's CEO and a future astronaut of Spaceport Sweden, and moderator for this next panel, which is about COVID-19 as a digital catalyst, innovation, and the new normal. Karin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Excellencies, ministers, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. So last year was really a turning point for digital transformation, and we saw how the urgency of the pandemic pushed technological innovation. And as physical interaction became impossible or nearly impossible, going digital really became a matter of business survival. But despite the challenges, the pandemic has also brought us an opportunity not only to transform, but also to reset. So how can we take this moment in time to really reflect and think about and start shaping a future that we would like to see? To discuss this today, we have a stellar panel with us, and we're looking at representatives from different sectors, from different products and services, from government, industry, and different countries. And our objective is to give you different perspectives of digitalization. What impact has it had on their organization, looking at operations, value chain, supply chain, customer engagement, deal flow, partnership, but also to look at the future. What exciting opportunities have we got ahead of us? What are they working on? What are the big bets? And also with the rollout of 5G, what opportunities will this bring to businesses and industry as we look to a more sustainable and digital economy going forward? So I would like for you to join me in please welcoming our panelists, and I'd like to start welcome up on stage our representative that we have here in the audience, which is Mr. Magnus Ekbom. He's the co-founder and chief strategy officer for Lazada. Please welcome Magnus. Give him a hand of applause, please.
Thank you. This side?
Yes, please. And joining us virtually, we have Miss Nadine Allen, to your far left. She's the president and head of strategy and technology and emerging business from Ericsson, and she joins us from Thailand. Welcome, Nadine. And then we have Mr. Rongrot Rangchupash. He's the president and CEO of CM Cement Group, and he's also joining us from Thailand. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And then we have Ms. Vi Lee. She's the co-founder and general partners of Dove Ventures, and you're based in Vietnam. Welcome, Vi.
Hello, everyone.
And last but certainly not least, we have Chong Hai Tu. He's the director of the 5G program office for the Infocom Media Development Authority, IMDA, based here in Singapore. So please put your hands together for the panel. So I'd like to start with you, Nadine. Ericsson is a leading provider of infocom and communications technology, and the pandemic has really underlined the criticality of connectivity. And we have a new normal where many of us work from home, but also do homeschooling, which puts a lot of pressure, of course, on networks. And Ericsson, you run a big consumer lab looking at trends and consumer behaviors and so forth. So can you share a little bit of what you've seen in the past year?
Yeah, absolutely. And no, I mean, I would start by saying, I think in Sweden, of course, we're super famous, but just in case we're not so famous outside of Sweden, I maybe give a little bit of insight into Ericsson. We are a global leader in ICT solutions, and we're actually very global. You know, we are present in nearly every country in the world. We do a lot of things, actually, but I would say we are best known for our substantial contribution to the development of mobile technology, and in particular to significant contributions to the development of 3GPP, which is actually the governing body for the development of standards in the mobile telecoms industry. So if you take Thailand, for example, where I am dialing in from, you know, here we pioneered 1G, 2G, 3G, now we're rolling out 4G and also 5G. And that's quite common in many countries where we have been and where we are. But I think the other thing that you also mentioned, Karen, that maybe is probably not so less well known about us, is that we invest a lot into research and development as a technology company, but we also conduct a lot of research into kind of 5G or mobile traffic and market insights, both across all technology types actually. And obviously at the moment, much more relevant for 4G and the development of 5G. So I will draw on some of those insights as I talk about what happened during the pandemic. So I would say, of course, digitalization has been a major trend actually for the last few years, both in the consumer and the enterprise space. But what has changed during 2020 in particular is the pace of that digitalization. You know, the pandemic, I think, summed up, really demonstrated to all of us the indispensability of technology in giving us a means to continue to be productive, both as a consumer and also as a business professional. When we look at insights coming out of consumer lab research from Ericsson, we see that during the pandemic, internet became much more integrated into daily life. We actually saw that 9 in 10 people, for example, globally increased their usage of internet activities, and actually 1 in 5 started doing completely new things altogether. 3 in 4 parents said that ICT was pretty fundamental to continuing the education of their kids at home, and also 84% of virtual medical consultations were made by first-time users. I was reading a study from Bain and Google actually, and they said that of 6 countries in Southeast Asia, 40 million people used the internet or came online for the first time in 2020. And we also saw some quite big shifts in traffic patterns. So we saw quite a big shift going from city centre to suburban areas, as you can imagine, because more people were working remotely. And we also saw big increases in downlink traffic, and also a need for more even bandwidth as more people were communicating from remote environments. There are a couple of great examples. One is Zoom, the platform that we're using now. I think Zoom really saw the power of exponentials during the pandemic. I think it went from 10 million daily meeting participants in December 2019 to 200 million in March 2020. And Microsoft Teams also saw a very similar trend. And I think that was the consumer element. Then from an enterprise perspective, these guys also continue to realize the benefits of digitalization, but some of them, to your point, Karen, were also forced to adopt given no other option. So they were looking at, around increased supply chain concerns, absence of manpower. These made enterprises focus much more on automation, robotics, remote control of systems, flexibility in how they configured and reconfigured production environments, AR, VR, cloud adoption. All of these things were much more accelerated and much more necessary actually as a result of the pandemic. And we saw a similar trend for small, medium businesses, who many were not really prepared for remote working, and in fact, made quite a big increase in collaboration tools for SMBs during the pandemic period. So I think to sum it up, we actually really saw the indispensability of technology solutions, and we've actually also seen both in consumer and enterprise sense an acceleration in the use of technology that means we will never probably go back now. So really now we have to build on that and really make sure that we accelerate the good things that have come out of this pandemic. Of course, there are a lot of bad things, but some of these things that we've talked about have really helped individuals to increase their productivity and the quality of life. And I think it's important that we continue to build on those trends.
Thank you, Nadine, for sharing that. It's very interesting. Can I ask a follow-up question on that? So what impact did this have on Ericsson and the work that you do and the networks that you're on?
Yeah, well, for us, of course, this really increased the significance and necessity of telecom networks. So, of course, there was no way that we could not carry on. I mean, we really had to, like many other industries, to adapt to new ways of working. And the substantial majority of our staff, we have around 100,000 people all around the world, have moved to a model of working from home. And of course, our network heroes, as we call them, who are those people on the front line who are rolling out and keeping networks performing well, we've had to ensure that we transform our practices to secure their safety. But I think despite some of the negative effects of the pandemic, the changed working model, working from home and remote from the office has also shown some benefits. And quite a big percentage of our people really have appreciated the flexibility and would like the flexibility to remain post-COVID. So as such, Ericsson has really, internally taken a good look at how we will permanently implement more flexible work arrangements, even as we come out of the pandemic.
Thank you so much, Nadine. I'd just like to remind everyone to post questions on Slido, so please keep them coming if you've got thoughts already now. So Magnus, I'd like to turn to you. You're the co-founder and Chief Strategy Officer of Lazada, a company obviously born online, born e-commerce company. And when you started out 9 years ago, it was a very different landscape. It was very nascent, a very limited ecosystem, if you like. And today you're the leading e-commerce platform with over 100 million users. What immediate impact did the pandemic have on Lazada and your operations and the work that you do?
Well, we usually say in this part of the world that every year is special. And last year was also quite special in every way. I think the first thing is that I don't think that we yet realize how much actually took place last year. I think we are saying many thoughtful things. We are sort of trying to synthesize and have good takeaways. We have our numbers that we share. I think it will take a good 5 years before we fully land in just how much transformation in terms of behaviors, in terms of how we run companies actually happened. And if we look from our perspective, I think the first sort of, we are a two-sided platform. We connect buyers and sellers of goods. That's ultimately what we do. And that there's been a change on the consumer side. I think everyone knows. We know how we are sitting at home. We are either restricted by governmental decree that we can't go outside, or we are simply spending more time in the premises that where we live or where we spend our time. And obviously we shop more online. I think that we all know that. But the bigger shift is really how we have changed the way companies run. And that is true for SMEs, that is true for everything from a street side vendor to a large MNC. And I think that effect is slowly starting to compound up. And I think we have seen it. Our core business is SMEs across Southeast Asia. We have over 2 million of them that work and make a living and run their companies on our platform. But that shift is, I would say, much more foundational than I think we yet fully see and realize. When you look at MNCs, on the other hand, it takes longer. I think we heard from IKEA that they changed overnight. That's very impressive to hear that a company of the size of IKEA can change that quickly. But I think that MNCs, they work also on some to extent annual cycles, and it takes a bit of time before we get the new organizations in place and so on. And I think that over the years to come is really when digitalization will truly kick in. So I would say a bit, we haven't seen nothing yet to some extent in terms of just how much yet is to come.
And you mentioned also, your marketplace model, and you're very much, a place for retailers and for SMEs. What impact has this had on smaller companies and on SMEs?
I think the first thing is that SMEs are quite nimble. They're quick to adapt and react. And I think the same thing was true when e-commerce started. Not just e-commerce, but sort of digital services, predominantly via apps, became a prevalent way of doing business and going about your daily life. SMEs was much quicker than larger companies for kind of obvious logical reasons. And I think we saw a similar development over the past year. We spoke a bit about supply chains earlier, and I think Piyush was sharing his quite optimistic view about the resilience of supply chains. And yes, I think that is true and that is evident. I think there is still we live in a sort of, the term bifurcation is used in a sort of the geopolitical context. There is also a bit of a bifurcation between companies with access to resources, access to capital, access to supply chain, and those who haven't. And I think that the crisis has also made that even more evident than perhaps was the case before. Large companies have access to financing, and sometimes bankers make the joke, they say that their job is to give money to people who don't need it. And it's a little bit the same thing with SMEs, that sometimes the SMEs take the tail end should be having a lack of access to investing into supply chains and reinvesting into their businesses. And I think that bifurcation was clear. But overall, the SMEs have done, I would say, much better than we first expected and anticipated. And I think the resilience that people have in terms of finding new ways to go about, just the daily life of running a company, running a business, how much people have been willing to change. I think that is quite phenomenal. If I were to sort of give my overall takeaway, I think much yet to come, but I think it's really a showcase and testament to the resilience of this region.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, a lot of companies perhaps had online as an add-on strategy before, but now overnight it had to become the strategy. I mean, were they ready for that? And also, I mean, Lazada, you must have become almost a lifeline for them. You provided a window of marketing and sales for them that they perhaps didn't have before.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, we do our best to provide a relevant, scalable, and should we say, easy to use platform. The SMEs do the job. The sellers and the brands, they do the job. And as you say, rightfully, that e-commerce was previously more of a, it wasn't a side business, but it was definitely something that was more of a, something built on top of what was already in place. And I think now e-commerce, and not e-commerce is a term that we shouldn't actually be using so much. I think digital commerce and digitalized commerce is a more relevant term, because e-commerce, it's just sort of moving from offline to online, and that's not really how companies work. The vast majority of companies have an offline presence, they have an online presence, and it's really how these two worlds step by step are coming together through digital infrastructure. So digitalized commerce, I think, is really the term we should be using more and more.
Thank you, good point. Thank you. I remind you to keep sending your questions in, so don't forget to do that. Mr. Rongroth, I'd like to turn to you. I mean, you're almost at the other end of the spectrum. You lead a conglomerate with over 100-year-old heritage in the perhaps very more traditional and very solid industry of cement, materials, packaging, chemicals. And can you give us a business perspective from Thailand and also from CM Cement Company? What impact has the pandemic had for you?
Thank you, Karen. You make me a little bit feel a little bit old, I guess. Basically, our company is really old. It's 100 years old. We are industrial conglomerates, basically operating out of Thailand, but we do operate throughout the ASEAN regions. As of now, we have 3 business units. One, of course, is cement and building materials. The other is chemicals, and the last one is packaging. Actually, today, cement is no longer our largest business unit. Chemicals today is our largest business unit. When the COVID hit Thailand, Thailand is actually one of the very first country outside of China that has had the COVID case. We found the first COVID case in the late January of 2020. As you know, Thailand is really relies on the tourism. Actually, tourism account for about 15 to 20% of our GDP. So COVID really hit us quite bad. We had a major lockdown of the country back in March, April, and to some certain extent in May. We were able to control it within about 2.5 months. So that was good, up until the end of last year when another wave of COVID hit us. That made us kind of realize that this is going to take a long time before we go back to the normal. Today we are during the 3rd wave, and it has been quite difficult, for Thai people. So basically, as of now, tourists is in trouble. Travels, is also not yet recovered. Fortunately, for our group, we as an industrial company, for example, our packaging business is doing doing quite well. As you can imagine, not only the e-commerce or digital commerce, but also, packaging for everyday's life. People pay attention to and use a lot of different packages in order to make sure that they are safe from the infection. So packaging has been performing quite okay. Chemicals also had a big dip when the COVID hit back in the first quarter of last year. But since then, the industry itself actually recovered quite good. So we had a good year last year, and it kind of carried over until this year as well. Cement building material is the one that really got impacted the most. I guess, not only the foreign investors of the property kind of could not come to Thailand. So that demand actually evaporated. And also the consumptions of the buyers of homes actually delay purchases. So, new homes and all those condominiums and commercial properties have been hit quite bad. Fortunately for us, as everyone mentioned, we employed a lot of digital technology, before the COVID. So that's why, we continue to exist in a way. Otherwise, with 95% of the people working from home, without the digital infrastructure, we wouldn't have been able to carry on our business. Similarly, we turned part of our business into online. So basically, out of more than 1,000 of our distributors have now, actually, COVID forced all the, old, aged, very difficult to change distributors to adopt to the technology quite fast. So that's I think is in a way is a very good catalyst for change. And in the same way, for our chemicals, all these digital that we employ into the manufacturing seems to be able to allow us to keep our supply chain and manufacturing quite resilient throughout the past 15, 16 months.
Thank you so much. Like you say, the hospitality industry has been really hit, and I understand how that impacts your cement and the building materials. I'd like to come back to your digitalization strategy, because you started quite early on, but I'll come back to you on that, please. So, Vi, I'd like to bring you into the conversation. You're a serial entrepreneur yourself, and you've started e-commerce companies yourself. And I believe last year you set up Doe Ventures, focusing on tech startups in Vietnam, and that 2019 was quite a record year. But what has the pandemic meant for Vietnam and for your newly started venture company? What are we seeing?
Thanks, Karen. I think COVID definitely made a huge impact on the startup ecosystem in Vietnam. However, in Vietnam, we feel very fortunate, very blessed, because of the government effective control of the spread of COVID. So in 2020, we only witnessed around 1,500 cases, and the number today is around 5,500 cases. Until now, we haven't gone through any complete lockdown in Vietnam, only a semi-lockdown once in April. So Doe Venture is we are a 50 million VC fund, mainly operates in Vietnam, and we invest in Series A tech companies in Vietnam and Southeast Asia. As you mentioned, 2019 was one of the best years for Vietnam tech investment. However, in the tech investment in 2020, we saw a decrease around 50% as compared to 2019. So the number was about 450 million in terms of total investment amount. So the main reason was because of the travel lockdown. Obviously, investors cannot travel to Vietnam, cannot do due diligence on companies. But we also see many positive signs. So why investment amount decreased 48%, the number of deals actually remained quite resilient, only down by 17% compared to 2019. And we actually see an increase in the number of investment with small check size, like less than 500,000, actually increased 11%. And we also saw a very rapid recovery of investment in Vietnam in H2 2020. So the total number of deals closed in the second half of the year in 2020 compared to 2019 is about the same level. In general, I think Vietnam has been very blessed and we have a very rapid recovery.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, I think Nadine mentioned before as well that during the pandemic, we've really seen how tech and tech companies have come to their own. What trends are you seeing? What type of startups are coming to you? Do you see any trends in terms of e-commerce or payment solutions, or what's on your radar at the moment?
So this is my humble observation. Obviously, I started my career in e-commerce, so I'm a bit biased towards e-commerce. So after the 2002 SARS crisis in China, I think Alibaba witnessed tremendous growth in its e-commerce operations, and they also managed to launch Taobao, focus on B2C, which later become an e-commerce giant. I think similarly, after the financial crisis in 2009-2010 period, we witnessed several innovations like cryptocurrency, P2P lending, or even sharing economy. So I definitely believe that after COVID, technology that support new online behavior, like in working, living, and entertainment, would gaining more traction. So I have huge belief in company in SaaS that help to digitalize SME and businesses. Companies in online media, in gaming, and entertainment, and definitely e-commerce would see tremendous growth.
So thank you so much. I'm just looking here, I've got a question come in terms of, we've heard a lot about e-commerce or digital commerce and business digitalization success stories. But how has electronic payment, what has that mean to ASEAN, and have we caught up here, would you say?
So e-payment in Vietnam is growing very fast. Obviously, there are more than 35 companies that have the license. And in Vietnam, the market is also still quite fragmented. We have more than 10 big players, including the local players like Momo, VNPay, including foreign players like Grab. We have Gojek coming. We also have C Group, also have the AirPay solution. So basically, the landscape is growing rapidly. And I think it's the best time for consumer because now they enjoy all the subsidized with doing online payment. And I think we also grow at least 30 to 50% on the payment transaction on an annual basis. So I still see that after COVID, the trend of cashless payment is growing quite quickly. Looking forward, I think most of the company would try to acquire substantial market share and try to become a substantial player in this space. And there's still chances for startup that can deliver great like enabler services like credit rating system. So in general, I would say that digital payment is definitely a trend, a growing trend in Vietnam.
Thank you so much. Magnus, do you want to chip in here, talking about your suppliers and the SMEs? Are they ready for this, or are they coming up?
Yeah, I think the digitalization of financial services is ongoing, and I think it has been for quite some years. I think Southeast Asia has been a bit of a laggard in terms of digital payments adoption, not just sort of the wallet or e-payment options, but also when you look at just debit cards or credit cards. It's never really happened, so to say. And I think that there is one, should we say, what I would just add is that there are two dimensions of digitalizing financial services. One is the infrastructure, and one is the consumer product. And I think right now we are seeing a extremely fast evolution in terms of consumer products, in terms of the wallets that are coming out and the different ways that you can pay as a consumer. I totally agree. It's a great time to be a consumer. The other side is how the infrastructure that is underlying these consumer products is evolving. And I think that's where Southeast Asia is still, should we say, finding its feet in terms of having that infrastructure, especially when you go to Philippines, you look at Indonesia. It is definitely evolving, but I think that is still an area which will take some time to fully materialize as an industry.
All right. Thank you so much. Hi, Tu. I'd like to turn to you, please. Singapore set out a digital strategy already, I think, in 2014 with the launch of the Smart Nation initiative and want to be at the forefront of the world. And with COVID, we showed a greater need than ever to be connected and how connectivity is a critical infrastructure. What impact has the pandemic had for Singapore as a city-state and as a digital hub?
Yeah. no doubt the pandemic has disrupted our way of life. It affected businesses, social engagement, and mostly affected our frontliner, healthcare worker, people who are handling the networks, the infrastructure. So it happens, and I think many speakers before that mentioned, and in typical Singapore style, in typical humanity, right? We dig deep in such situations and we deal with it as an individual, as family units, as a nation, as society. Nonetheless, there's a silver lining among the dark cloud of COVID-19. Prior to the pandemic, there was significant effort to drive digitization. Now we see an even more determined drive by government, by big organizations, even SME, individuals, and even the elderlies are embracing technology. Not just technology, mobility to combat COVID-19, to elevate the new way of conducting businesses, social engagement, and also the way of life. So all this for a better tomorrow by really certainly opening ourselves, embracing technology and mobility. So the ongoing COVID-19 situation has kind of reinforced the importance of a resilient and robust digital connectivity infrastructure. So it enables us to conduct essential services like healthcare, banking, and workers are able to continue to perform commercial functions like working from home or even schooling or learning from home. But what is different about infrastructure it is something that takes time. For example, 10 years ago, Singapore has embarked on a massive exercise to fiber up Singapore to the very last mile. And today, more than 90% of our households have fiber to the home. And that allowed them to benefit from gigabit kind of broadband services. It enables students to conduct home-based learning. It enables businesses and workers to work from home, and our seniors to benefit from telemedicine or even entertainment from the comfort of their living room. So in Singapore, we believe in a continual and timely investment in our connectivity infrastructure. And today, amid the uncertainty of COVID-19, we are forging ahead with our 5G plan. And we have, in fact, committed, we have awarded and committed to deploy 2 nationwide networks. And this network will provide at least 50% coverage by end of 2022 and nationwide by 2025.
Thank you so much. That's hugely exciting. And I'd like to turn back to you, Nadine, in terms of looking at 5G and what opportunities will this bring for industry and what business opportunities do we see ahead, and also how can it contribute to a sustainable research and to really think about the future that we'd like to see.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I would start by saying that we've actually seen, pretty good progress. I mean, since its launch 5G globally 22 months ago, we've seen now around 160 live 5G networks around the world, and we forecast that by the end of this year, 25% of the global population will have access to 5G if they want to take it. So, in March of this year, South Korea, who were one of the first adopters of 5G, are already carrying 50% of their network traffic on 5G, which is really quite phenomenal when you compare to previous generations of mobile technology. But let's talk about what it is. I mean, firstly, if you compare to 4G, it can be between 10 to 100 times faster. It really depends upon the spectrum, and there are a couple of other considerations, but it's a lot quicker. It can also support many more device types. It's not just about handsets anymore, it's about sensors, CPU, robotics, and so on and so forth. Latency is also a key improvement area in 5G, and it's 5 times quicker to respond than 4G. So that's pretty key for use cases like cloud gaming, but also more advanced industrial use cases. And it's also inherently more energy efficient and more secure as a technology. So 5G is going to really support new growth and innovation. I mean, when we look at the consumer side, it's expected that mobile gaming and enhanced video, including augmented and virtual reality, will drive the majority of traffic. amongst all 5G digital services. And despite the pandemic, we've still seen a lot of interest from consumers to upgrade to 5G. And we think around 300 million smartphone users will take up 5G in this year alone. But I think the really exciting potential is when it comes to what we call broader digital transformation. And this is an area that kind of holds, in my view, really great potential and is also a bit close to my heart. So I'm naturally more animated when I talk about it. But enterprises, as you know, are driving their own transformation, and they're looking to integrate across their entire business estate and their assets. They're looking at integrating and driving insights across production environments with the way they collaborate and their working methods, with access to insights to the markets they serve, and also their customers and the way in which they serve their customers. And they want to do all of that in a very highly secure way. At the same time, enterprises are also looking at integrating fixed, remote, and mobile end environments and endpoints, which is also becoming quite key. And 5G has both the performance, the security, and the flexibility to address this transformation. So it really does allow an organization to connect all of its assets via one single communication platform. And if I were to talk super briefly about the flexibility part, I mean, 5G allows you to bring together or connect fixed environments, remote environments, and mobile environments in a consistent way. So you don't see the same restrictions that you perhaps see with wide environments. And we are seeing enterprises, particularly in areas like manufacturing, place quite considerable value on the ability to quickly reconfigure their environment when we cut the cables. So, we're seeing a pretty big industry potential. We've put a value on 5G for industry digitalization of around $700 billion by 2030, and in Southeast Asia around just under $90 billion by 2030, with a whole host of people involved in the realization of that. I mean, I probably won't talk too much more, Karen, because I know we're running short on time, but the industries that we really expect to benefit quite considerably are in area of manufacturing, logistics, energy, even mining, oil and gas. Those kind of environments and those kind of organizations are also really looking at how they can, integrate everything in a much more cohesive way, and we see huge potential from 5G as a single communications platform in that space.
Thank you so much, Nadine. It's exciting to learn, and even more exciting, of course, to see the possibilities that rolled out with 5G, so to be the backbone of the digital economy. So, Rongrot, I'd like to turn to you, and Nadine talked about the opportunities for manufacturing. I mean, you set out on a digital journey already, I think in 2015, you shared with me, and also how you tried to implement this digital strategy, but it wasn't all that easy looking at your supply chain and partners. They weren't quite sort of ready for the work that you were doing already. Do you want to share some about that work and where you're heading next with your digital strategy? And what does digitalization look like in the cement industry?
Yeah, I think, our digital strategy is a major part of our overall business transformation. We realize that, we cannot run the business the way that we used to be running it long time ago. So knowing that in mind, that we need to employ technology, we need to integrate innovation initiatives into our business model. So we embark upon the business transformation 2 or 3 years ago. This COVID situation, together with a lot of works that we have started already in the digital platform, actually allow us to accelerate the transformation efforts. I just give you an example. We employed digital technology to our network of the cement and building materials, which is like I mentioned earlier, was very, very difficult to adopt any changes. But because of COVID and a lot of retails and shops actually being forced to lock down or close, the only way to survive is basically doing this e-commerce delivery and also at the same time, promoting, using the social media to promoting the products to the consumers. And actually, what we find is that a lot of consumers, homeowners, actually quite receptive to this way of doing business. So basically, with that in mind, that's created a lot of momentum upon the, not only us but also people along the value chains to adopt this technology and actually help improving it. Another good example is our adoption of the packaging for the e-commerce or digital commerce. It's becoming large. Food delivery and all package and all the merchandises. And before, because it's considered a low margin business, so our packaging business actually was interested into, but not too much enthusiastic about entering into providing packaging into the e-commerce supply chain or e-commerce merchandisers. But with the COVID, we actually had no choice. We had to go into that business, and actually that after a year, that has proven to be, I think, a very good and very wise strategy. So I think is the on one hand, is the you can always look at this crisis or COVID crisis as a very challenging. Well, on the other hand, it actually forced you to adopt changes actually easier and more energies into those changes.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Magnus, your digital strategy and plans going forward. I'm still waiting to have my fridge, talking about IoT here, talking to my Redmart app and get my order to yourself and have my drone deliver my goods.
Yeah,
I'm willing to see that.
Full of opportunities. No, I think we are a bit at the point, in the way I think we look at it, is that technology has the possibility of doing much more than perhaps the consumers are fully ready for. And I think that is also when we look at 5G, I think all of the discussions we just heard, I mean, there is a tremendous amount of opportunities yet to be fully explored. If that is more on the, should we say, business manufacturing side, or if it's more consumer facing, I think it's a bit yet to be seen. And I think that many companies are also kind of finding their feet a bit. What is the relevant application? And while technology-wise, we could already today, or even a few years ago, we could have a fridge that was synced up to an app. That's not possible. The question is, how much value does that bring to you as an end consumer? Does that really, should we say, is that a game changer or not? And I think that's a bit the question when we look at application of technology versus the technology itself.
Thank you so much. We had a question to you here from the audience. There's a tech battle escalating in Southeast Asia between super giants like Sea and Grab and Gojek. What's the future for super apps, do you think, in the region?
I think everyone's trying to get the attention of the consumer and trying to keep the consumer stay as long as possible. So we look at a market like China. I think the market in Southeast Asia most likely would follow the Chinese traction. And obviously, I think each of the companies that you just mentioned, they have their own advantages and use cases. So for example, I think C Group have very strong e-commerce use cases right now with Shopee growing rapidly. And they're building the habit of the consumer, checking out the apps and buying a lot of goods for their daily needs. And also in Vietnam, Shopee actually acquired one of our partners' previous portfolio company, Foodie, and they launched a very successful food delivery business in Vietnam as well. For Grab, I think they both Grab and Gojek, I think approach the market in a very different type of use case. So they started as ride-hailing company, and now they try to expand to everything. So Gojek also have a very strong presence in Vietnam, and I think the use case in Indonesia was very substantial. So they integrate a lot of services. So I think the essence is they try to deliver the most value to consumer, and I think that's understandable, and that's definitely one of the strategy, not only the regional players trying to do, but in Vietnam, we have conglomerates, we have, traditional businesses trying also to build super apps. So I would say that in the long run, right, consumer would not be able to install 10 apps, like 10 super apps. Obviously, they will have to pick out the best one. And it's too early to tell who would win this kind of battle. But I would say the ones that give the consumer the most use case and provide it in a very convenient way would be able to capture the consumer attention and definitely deliver the most value to consumer.
Interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. Hi, Tu. I'd like to turn to you. We have a question here from the audience as well. And what's your vision for 5G for Singapore? And also, is IMDA looking at any regional cooperation when it comes to 5G?
Right. 5G to me is a new generation of internet. Like what Nadine has mentioned earlier, it's a industrial grade internet. It's going to transform the way that enterprise conduct the business and manage their operations. And with this pandemic, I think there's also plenty of opportunity for the consumer space, particularly in the AR, VR space. We see that the took off of video conferencing like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, WebEx. And while the general populations has embraced video conferencing, we also realize that it is not good enough. And I think a new generation of immersive collaboration tools and interaction tools will emerge with the convergence of 5G, AR, VR, and even the pandemic situations. We are always looking at opportunities, plenty of opportunity to collaborate with the forefront cities in 5G as well as in Southeast Asia. And in fact, our vision is really, IMDA is really, if I may borrow the narrative from Chuan Hong, the CEO of IMDA. IMDA will play the role as architect of Singapore digital future, and we will do that through the 3D, the dream, the design, and deliver. We will dream about the possibility of the 5G and the various technology, and we'll design and make practical plan through collaborations between government and industry. And finally, we will deliver all this plan through an upskill workforce, both public and private sector.
Exciting. So we've got a bright future ahead. I like how we can dream for Singapore, dream for the region, of course. So we've got a couple of minutes left. So I'd like to come back to where we started in terms of what opportunity have we now got to actually reflect and also think about and start shaping the future that we would like to see? And how can we capitalize on the ongoing digitalization and the opportunity that 5G brings? It's a big question for a few seconds, but if I could ask you all to give me a sort of 30-second thought on where are we in 5 to 10 years' time? I'd like to start with you, Nadine, please.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, we've already started the deployment of 5G in this part of the world. We've already seen in Singapore and Thailand and Philippines, and, we're seeing lots of trials as well. I think that the big potential really for me lies in supporting industries to accelerate their own transformation. I think the one thing that I didn't really discuss earlier, but it's also quite relevant, is that the global ICT sector only contributes something like 1.5% to global carbon emissions. So it's not a big contributor to carbon emissions. But the key, I think, with technology is the fact that ICT has the potential to really enable quite a reasonable reduction in carbon emissions for other sectors such as energy and transport. So I think there's a whole sustainability element as well to accelerating ICT adoption for industrial transformation. But I think my other big takeaway is 2020 was a really tough year for many, many reasons, right? And a lot of individuals and businesses were impacted in a way that they never could have anticipated. And I think that somebody made the point earlier about the ability for people to be resilient, to transform and to continue to survive. And I think we saw that in great abundance. And I think a lot of people started doing a lot of things they've never done before for the first time. And we demonstrated actually that in a number of areas, we've improved our productivity as a consequence of the way the model changed. So I think what's key is that we really build on that and we really accelerate that both for consumer side, but also for industrial transformation. And I think the other thing we have to think about, Karen, it's not really been discussed, is that, you know, when we really have to be, as we accelerate the technology side, we have to make sure that we're taking care of people as individuals. I was reading something the other day that said, you know, there will now be technology that supports you to say when you've been online for too long, when you need to move away and you need to take a break. So I think that whole space also needs to evolve as well to make sure that we're keeping technology for good and we're using technology for good.
Thank you. Brongrod.
I think one of the things that will transform the industries that we are in today is ESG. Actually, you know, the past year and a half has taught us that, you know, we're not safe. And it's better to be proactive and be prepared for those disruptions, whether it's nature or whether it's pandemic. So ESG is the one thing that I believe is going to be the most important aspect of our business model in the next 5 to 10 years. Of course, you know, by employing technology, it's going to help us to be able to live, or at least, you know, keeping up with the trend in the ESG, and hopefully, you know, our people can do the same way. So when you have this trend and you have technology, and hopefully we can motivate enough of our employees to adopt these changes, I think it's going to be quite good future for our industry.
Thank you. V.
Yeah, I truly believe that technology will transform the way we live and work. It would give all companies equal chance to enter new markets. It will give everyone more comfort, and especially I think that in 5 to 10 years time, I think the way we use Zoom also change a lot, right? We would have a very direct, like face-to-face conversations with all the audience instead of just a 2D layers like this. I also agree with all these ESG movements. So the way we use technology needs to be sustainable, and it would have to enhance social life as well. So to sum up, I think very thankful for the opportunities to become a catalyst to enable all the positive change in technology.
Thank you. Haito.
We have recently embarked on an extensive roadmap study about the 5G application in the various sectors across industry, maritime, as well as aviation, smart estates, and smart mobility. And across all these sectors, we saw a few key tech domains that is going to create significant impact in the near and even the longer term. And AR/VR, the augmented reality and virtual reality, is something that we see will have an impact across both consumer and different sectors in the industry. The other big area that we see is robotics and IoT that facilitate automations and Industry 4.0 is another areas that with the convergence of these technologies and 5G will create a lot of value in the enterprise space.
Thank you. Magnus.
Yeah, I think many thoughtful things have been said. Whenever we have seen big technology shifts in history, I think there's a common phrase that we tend to overestimate the short-term impact and we tend to underestimate the long-term impact. My guess is that we will see a similar development with 5G. It is, as was just said, industrial-grade internet that will enable completely new ways of how we look at infrastructure, transportation, power grid. There is no limit to the application of use cases, but also we need ecosystems around technology for it to really realize its full potential and full value. I think it will take some time for these ecosystems to develop, but when they do, I think we will see a transformation of society that I hopefully will bring a lot of value to everyday life and to people across the whole region in Southeast Asia and the world.
What a beautiful words to end this session on. And thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you for sharing your perspective and the impact of the pandemic on your organization. We've learned from a different part of different sectors, products and services, and government and industry. And I think a couple of takeaways is that, you know, people can do extraordinary things, and we've seen how people have stepped forward, and without people, we can't really capitalize on the technology that's ahead of us. And also, I think, you know, we're just scratching the surface. We've yet to see the end of the pandemic, but also the vast opportunities that we have ahead of us. So for sure, everything has escalated during the past couple of years, and good things will continue to grow and develop. And I just can't wait to see how the rollout of 5G and how digitalization will help to create new business opportunities, but also help us create a more sustainable world going forward. Thank you so much, and put your hands together for our panel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karin. That was a great session. Really, really fascinating insights there from all your speakers. Now, just before we get to our final panel of the day, there's a final message from another one of Sweden's great ambassadors, this time from the Philippines. Let's hear from him.
Please, Ambassador of Sweden to the Philippines. Here are my 3 reasons for Swedish companies to do business in the Philippines. Reason number 1, it's a big and rapidly growing market. 110 million people and a steady high growth of 6 to 7%. Reason number 2, a business-friendly government, which is making it easier for foreign companies to do business in the Philippines by lowering taxes, improving infrastructure, cutting red tape, fighting corruption, and liberalizing foreign ownership. And English is the main business language. Reason number 3, a young, well-educated, enterprising, and English-speaking workforce and relatively low labor costs make the Philippines a good place to establish presence in. The Embassy of Sweden and Business Sweden are in place in Manila to support you if you're needed. Welcome to the Philippines.